Okay, so before we start the video, so in the last video what we did was we created the model, we made the model and we did the UVs. If you want to follow along, I recommend you go watch that video so that you can actually texture the model in this one. So before we start to texture this in Substance Painter, one thing to keep in mind is that I will be using a specific stylized material, which you can get in the video description. There's a video on how to make it, or there's also a video where you can just download the material itself. So if you're going to follow along, that's one thing to keep in mind. You're going to need the stylized material that's in the video description. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and load our low poly model. I'm going to set my document to 2048 DirectX, and then everything else just off. And the template, I just leave it as select template default. By default is the metallic roughness environment. And here in Substance Painter, I have moved some of the windows around, so yours may look a little bit different. But just find the texture settings and go to Bake Mesh Maps. So click on that, and then here what I'm going to do is change the resolution of the bake. Under high definition meshes, we want to load our high poly model. We're going to scroll down, increase the anti-aliasing. You can set it to 4x4 or 8x8. I'm going to change this to by mesh name, and I'm going to disable these other maps. Now the reason I'm disabling those is because sometimes I prefer to see what normal map looks like before we spend time baking all the other maps. So it's better to just bake the normal maps first, the world space and the normal map. And if that looks good, if the bake looks good, then you can proceed with the other maps. So in this case, it looks like it looks good for the most part. I'm not seeing anything weird. And to cycle through these, just press B. So now we can open the bake window again, and then we can enable these. But we're going to set these to by mesh name so that there's no intercepting. I think the ambient occlusion, I'm just going to leave it. But you could also just change that as well to by mesh name. So let's just wait for the maps to bake here. Shouldn't take too long since it's relatively low poly, and our high poly is also pretty low poly as well. We're not using a ZBrush mesh here. When you do use a ZBrush mesh, it does take slightly longer to bake. Alrighty, so click OK, and now all our maps have been baked. And we can cycle through these by pressing the B key. So this will show you all the baked maps. And then you could press M to go back to the regular view. Alrighty, so I think it looks pretty good. So like I said, we're going to be using the 3DX stylized smart material. So I'm going to click here to load smart materials. And then all you have to do is pretty much drag it in onto the model. And that's going to apply it. Now by default, I'm going to get rid of these layers. And let's see here, I'm going to change the main color as well. So I want this to be more like a gray color for the barrel. So that's the thing about this material, is that you can download it and apply it to your model, but keep in mind that you still have to change some settings depending on what you want your model to look like. So I'm reducing the amount of that edge layer. And to cycle through the maps, you can press the C key. I'm going to increase the roughness for the for this, so that it looks a little bit shinier. I'll increase it just a little bit more. Okay, let's see what the cavity map is doing. So the cavity is giving us a little bit of dirt in between the cavities. going to reduce the intensity of that a little bit. Alright, so this one is adding color variation. I think I'm going to, let's see here, may actually turn this one off. I don't think it's giving me what I want for this model in particular. Just keep it off, I'll delete it. And then this one also gives color variation from top to bottom. And the ambient occlusion is essentially, you can use it to add like dirt on crevices, or you could also use it to have baked ambient occlusion if you wanted to. If you're going to PBR, you don't want to have like a baked ambient occlusion, of course. In this case, since it's stylized, I'm gonna have it with a little bit of ambient occlusion. Maybe make it look like it's a little bit of dirt as well, to give this a little bit of color. Okay, in the top layer is baked lighting. Let's see here. I think I'm going to have to turn this one off for this model. Like I said, depending on what you're doing and what your model is for. If you're going for stylized baked lighting, like a baked lighting texture, you can keep that on or even increase the intensity. I think we're going to go for slightly more PBR on this one. We'll make the dirt just a little bit lighter. And let's click on the mask for the cavity here. And you know, it's a good idea to play with some of the settings here. Sometimes you get some good results when you play with the amount of the mask and the settings of it. Okay, so we have our original color. So I'm going to duplicate that, and we're going to give this more, we're going to make this look more interesting. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to start masking. See, we can mask by geometry. And I'm going to open the UV window, and having our UV straight is going to make this a lot easier. So I can just drag here, press X, and then paint that out. So having our straight UVs here makes this a lot easier than if our UVs were not straight. See, I want to do the same with the top. I want this ribbon to have a little bit of a different color than the rest of the barrel, just to make it more interesting. Okay, there we go. And I'm masking by geometry here. Go back to paintbrush. And let's see here, we can play with this. We can maybe make this darker. We can make it have color. We can do all sorts of things with this. Now that we have our mask, we can do anything we want when it comes to the actual color. We can make it shinier as well, or less shiny. Okay, let's see here, what else can we do? I'm going to make a new fill layer. I'm going to disable pretty much everything except for color. I'm going to set the roughness a little bit low, and then let's go to, let's look for the smart masks. And let's see here. I'm going to choose this one, which is the ground dirt. And essentially what I want to do is, I want to make the bottom slightly darker. I'm going to remove the grunge one, or reduce the amount. so it's not as noticeable. We can change the color here. Think something like that. Give it some color as well if we want this to be dirt. And let's see what this looks like as a multiply. You can change the blending mode of layers however you want. One thing I want to do is I want to add a paint, and I'm going to mask the bottom, because right now this is on top of our painted section. I'm going to mask this out, top of that. And we can play with the settings of the amount of this dirt. This is a stylized model, but I think we can have, you can always add a little bit of dirt and leaks and, more details to it. It doesn't have to be completely flat. The more flat your model is, the less interesting it looks. And sometimes a lot of that can be attributed to your roughness. Adding details to a model is not always about as you can add interest to it by having variation in the roughness as well. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. And what I'll do here is I want this to be, well, I'm just experimenting a little bit here. I want the bottom to be a little bit darker than the top, just so that's almost like a gradient to it. But I don't think this is looking the way I want it to, so I think I'll just not too happy with this, so I'm just gonna keep it really low opacity. Let's see here, my ambient occlusion. I'm gonna make it look more like it's a little bit rusty, but it's kind of clean, it's kind of smooth. And then I'm going to duplicate that layer, and then what I'll do is I'm going to use this one, which looks interesting to me. Scale this up, and then maybe paint some like leaks on the model. Not everything you do has to be through a smart mask. You can always add stuff by hand. And there are different brushes here in Painter. You can also download some online. You can make your own alphas as well, just to add more interest to your model. So I'm just going to add this around the model. Ideal to uniform. It would be better to have if I was going to spend more time on this and make it look really good, what I would do is I would make my own leak alpha, or just look for one online and import it into Substance, and then have use a few different ones so that it looks like there's more variation. But in this case, I'm just giving you an idea here. I'm not saying that your model should look way better than this once you're done with it. Let's look for another one. I think this one looks interesting. So I just want to give you an idea of what you can do in Painter. We're spending a lot of time actually making this look great. The tutorial is mostly to give you an idea of what you can do, and then you can take use the same techniques and make it look really good. It might be useful here to get a few more alphas online or make your own, just to add more grunge detail. Okay, what I want to do is I want to change the color of this one. Make it a little bit more yellow. Okay, I mean, so that's pretty much all there is to, texturing something that's stylized. It's I would definitely add a few more layers, add more grunge to it, get a few off on it, make it look a lot better. Obviously, for the purposes of this tutorial, I just want to show you the tools and give you an idea of what you can do, on the model, making sure that it looks as bestly. I just want to show you the tools, and that, of course, I would highly recommend you spend way more time in this. Make it look good. So here I'm just adding a few chips here, just another layer with height on it, and then it's just adding a little bit of damage. So you can add this in Substance Painter, you don't necessarily have to take it into ZBrush. But that's pretty much it for this video. So if you like the tutorial, let me know if I missed anything or if you have any questions. So yeah, that would be great to hear if you guys liked it, and I'll see you in a future video.